Hello, and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your best returning host, Madelyn.
I'm your best... I don't know. I'm Emma. Could come up with anything.
And thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. It's a side quest here at Talk This, and it's my turn to pick the topic, which means that we're going to be chatting over the course of this episode about the gaming discourse element of my choosing. And this time, because it's just absolutely out of season for this, but I've been thinking about it since it was in season, and it hasn't been my turn to choose since this was relevant.
That doesn't seem right, but okay.
It's pretty close. I hadn't really clocked the Game Awards were happening until it was too late.
Okay.
6 weeks.
Yeah, no.
6 weeks is early December. Anyway, this week we're going to be talking about gaming awards shows. And
Weren't
what's
they in
good
November, though?
No, it was in December.
Are you sure?
Oh my god.
Are you sure?
I'm going to look it up now. Pretty sure. It's a strong start to the episode. December 10th, 2020.
Yeah, but that was more than 6 weeks ago.
Okay, I'll count it out at some point while you're talking during the episode.
Okay.
In any case, I didn't think to have opinions on it until it was too late. How about that? I don't remember what I picked last time. It was like gaming history last time. Console generations,
yeah.
Which was also sort of relevant a couple weeks after the fact. So it's Talk This when we're talking about something, roughly 2 months after it would be a good SEO thing to be talking about.
Exactly.
Anyway, before Emma rudely interrupted me by doubting how calendars work, I was going to explain that, we're going to talk about, what are the current gaming awards ceremonies that are out there, what's good about how they are now, and what could use some improvement, and what's outright bad, and what would our ideal game awards look like.
Mm-hmm.
And does Jeff Keighley really need to be involved?
I think it's Keighley.
Is it Keighley? I meant to look this up beforehand.
Pretty sure it's Keighley.
Nice. I do my research by reading.
It's okay. He's just Jeff. So.
Does Jeff need to be involved? Is it a requirement that he be involved?
I kind of think it is, to be honest.
At this point.
Who is he exactly? What is his job description now?
Game Awards man.
Just industry hype man, basically?
I think so. Yes.
So weird.
He started out as a 14-year-old working on one of the predecessors of the Game Awards. And just did not ever stop.
Just fell in love, I guess, with award shows.
Apparently. Well, specifically with Game Award shows and nothing else. Anyway, so let's jump in a little bit to kind of what are the current offerings in this space before I start dropping hot take after hot take after hot take. So the original, one of the original, there are a lot of old game shows, right? There was the Arcade Awards and the Golden Joysticks in the UK, which are still going on. There are some Game Awards that have been going on for almost 40 years. Which, is a little crazy. I guess it's not that crazy, but it feels a little crazy. But the run-up to what Game Awards are now really started in the 90s. The very first televised Game Awards show was called, and this is real, Cybermania 94, the Ultimate Gamer Awards. Which, from the title, you probably have an idea of what that was.
Yeah.
Even back in 1994, they had pretty much the exact same problem that they had throughout the history of the various Game Awards incarnations, which is that there were too many celebrities who didn't want to be there, being part of it, and not the focus on the games. And that continued to be a problem.
Yep.
So pre the Game Awards, which, to be honest, it's really almost the only Game Awards show worth discussing, I would say. That's not totally true.
I mean, what do you mean by worth discussing? It's certainly the only one that, like, seems to be, like, excited about having a Twitter presence, if that's what you mean.
That is sort of what I mean. I feel like it's the only one that has even a little bit of, like, real industry clout.
The Game Awards?
Kind of?
I'm more impressed by, like, the when it has, like, an IGF thing. I'm more interested in the game when I see that on its thing.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. But you and I don't think get to count. I think get to count as a little bit more niche in some ways than the average award show viewer, perhaps.
I mean, it's like the difference between, like, when, like, the film has, like, Sundance award winner on it or something versus, like, Oscars, I guess. Sure. Even that might be overstating it a little bit.
I would say so.
Overstating it in terms of, like, the Game Awards are very much not the Oscars. Not that I...
Right.
I think the IGF to, like, Sundance is a better comparison there. But
in some ways, although I would say Sundance certainly has a better press team.
Sure.
So what I meant was the Game Awards are probably the ones that you've heard of even if you don't pay any attention to Game Awards.
Sure.
As opposed to, like, in movies, right? Like, you've heard of the Oscars, you've heard of the Golden Globes, you've probably heard of some of these, like, more prestige-y, independent, like, you've heard of Cannes, and you've heard of that kind of thing. So in terms of kind of, like, the tiers of Game Awards, it does feel like a lot of people pay attention to the Game Awards, and then you have to get, relatively actually focused on the industry to have people paying attention to things like the GDC Awards or the Indie Developers Awards. That's all I mean.
But even then, the conversation around the Game Awards is never... Well, it's not really about who wins. It's about what games were announced at the Game Awards. So there's also that
something that I want to talk about, because it's a weird little unique little conundrum, isn't it? That isn't really addressed in any of our other award shows.
Yeah.
Any other premiere award shows for mediums.
Yeah, like, I would think the most you have at, like, the Oscars or the Emmys is, like, someone being a presenter and they're, like, announced, like, in the upcoming film thing as, like, a promotion. But this has literal, like, people watch it and react to it and stuff because there are new game announcements, not necessarily because of what's winning the awards. And the presentation itself is definitely skewed pretty heavily towards the announcements as well.
Absolutely. And that's always been true. So before the Game Awards were the Game Awards, they were the Spike Video Game Awards, unsurprisingly hosted on Spike TV, from 2003 to 2013. Also produced by Jeffy K.
His one true love, really video game award shows.
What a niche, right?
Yeah.
Imagine from the age of 14 deciding what I'm going to do is video game award shows and then freaking doing it.
Yeah.
It's, you gotta respect. You gotta respect the hustle.
I mean, now, like, without E3 and stuff, he's cornered, like, the virtual event space, too. So.
That's true.
He's hustling.
The man is here to dominate.
Please don't say that.
Anyway. So the Spike Video Game Awards, look, all the stuff about, like, the same things that are depending on your perspective, like, overly commercialized or very exciting about the Game Awards, were pretty much there in the Spike Video Game Awards as well, except that they really had just a bizarre slate of celebrity hosts. Not that
they still
aren't,
sort of do.
I know that they do. Samuel L. Jackson hosted the Spike Video Game Awards 4 times.
I mean, he's a gamer.
Is he?
I don't know.
Is he? I don't know.
Maybe.
Jack Black hosted it? Fine. I believe Jack Black has played video games.
Jack Black's in a video game. He's in
I know.
He's Brutal Legend. It's his video game thing.
And he's in Tony Hawk. I know. We just talked about him last week.
Yeah.
Jack Black, I believe. Snoop Dogg maybe has played a video game, but probably doesn't remember it.
Sure.
Neil Patrick Harris. I don't know. Hard to judge if he
Probably
would
plays
be
Candy
interested
Crush.
in... Probably plays Candy Crush. You're absolutely right. Don't mean that in a derogatory way. Just mean he's a mobile gamer.
Yes.
And then there's Joel McHale, who was the last host, and it just absolutely dumped on everybody who was there, apparently.
I feel like I vaguely remember that, actually.
Which makes sense, right? Joel McHale's whole career, you know, even post-Community, even during Community, is about making fun of people. So it makes sense. But it certainly maybe isn't the right vibe for an award show.
Yeah.
In any event, you know, and they also, I mean, did you see the trophy? Did you see the trophy for this? The monkey trophy?
No.
It's in our notes. You should take a look at it. We should post it. Every year, the trophy was this monkey with a crown on it in different color.
Oh, in a different color. That's fancy. Oh, I see it.
Right? So imagine having a whole array of these, like, monkey kings.
Very chrome.
Yes. It's bold. It's bold. So yeah, I mean, the Spike Video Game Awards got pretty, like, panned pretty much every year, in that they were really just there to kind of laugh at gamers, because they were targeted at sort of a broader audience in some ways, being on cable television. And so, you know, every year they kind of got panned for, like, the jokes are lazy, they're, like, punching down, there's not enough time spent with the developers, yada yada. These celebrities, like, don't know what they're doing and clearly don't want to be here. And many of those things, to the credit of the Game Awards, I think have been improved. But it's definitely still stuff that's in the DNA of it that I think they've found difficult to entirely extract.
Yeah.
Because
something about, I think it, like, Jeff is the industry hype man, right? So, like, it's kind of his job. But I always feel in the Game Awards that maybe it's a little too self-congratulatory. I mean, I know it's an award show, but the tone is always like, especially this year, like, you know, games bring us all together even when we can't go outside. And stuff like that is always a little bit like, oh, yeah, sure, okay. Neat. So some ways it feels like the pendulum has swung maybe too far in the opposite direction.
Oh, and that absolutely makes sense. It's something that's, like, difficult to avoid when you come from this very commercial foundation.
Yeah.
Right? And I mean that literally in terms of, like, making money, but also in terms of, like, this whole thing is a commercial. That's something that has become, like, how this happens and part of the culture of the event. And in some ways, like, that's dope. I love a good Smash trailer as much as anybody else, even though I don't play or enjoy Super Smash Bros., really.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it does make it difficult to really give the awards part of it the heft that it might need to, like, play on the same field as the Emmys or something like that.
Yeah. It very much, I feel like the advertisements somewhat feel like a way to trick people into watching it, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe trick is too harsh, but lure people into watching it. So, like, I understand it as, like, a quick way, like, how can we get people to immediately start watching these awards and making them popular? Stick a Super Smash announcement in there, you know? But it feels like maybe after a few years they should have started walking back those advertisements a little bit and prioritizing the awards more. But I do not think that has particularly happened.
So here's the problem with that, because I sort of agree in theory. So eventually, like, after 2013, Spike TV, like, dropped the ratings for the show were never good. And they attempted kind of a rebrand with the last show. They, like, changed the name of it a little bit, and Jeff tried to make it more focused on the developers in some way, and seemingly failed, more or less. So they dropped it, and then in 2014, he started at the Game Awards, like, basically independently, more or less. Not independently, though, with the backing of Reggie and Kojima and, you know, anybody that you could want from any of the big companies with their backing. So that's one reason it's difficult to disentangle. Another is that, like, Jeff has been very public about the fact that, like, the money from this comes from those promotional spots.
That's true.
But like, isn't that weird? Because it's like you never think about like, oh, like the Oscars, who pays for all of that? The Golden Globes, who pays for that? I have never thought about that even once. So it's weird to think about the Game Awards as being something that has to pay for itself.
Yeah.
But then again, of course, the Oscars have to pay for themselves too. I don't know anything about where that money comes. Maybe there's membership in some way. There must be to be a member. I mean,
it's run by some sort of foundation, right? Like all the awards are. So
yeah,
they must just have. I assume they have backers or whatever there, or whatever.
That's fair. So it sounds like
Plus
order
ads.
to really,
they do have ads. They have commercials. You know.
I mean that is true. The television rights perhaps help pay for it somewhat. I didn't think about that. But the Game Awards has been really resistant to TV ever since Spike backed out, because rightly they think they can reach more people online, which has proven to be a savvy bet, I think. I do wonder what happens to the commercials. I mean, we talked about this, I can't remember on what show. We talked about this, I feel like, a lot over the past couple of months in various episodes about how, companies don't need E3 anymore. They don't need any of these industry-wide events in the same way as they did even 5 years ago. So while like Smash reveal trailers are a real tradition of the Game Awards, and so maybe they will continue to happen because it's a tradition and that's just what they do. These companies certainly don't need the Game Awards as much as the Game Awards needs these companies.
Sure.
Unless they decide to go nonprofit or something, which would be neat. It would be an interesting experiment.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Are we ready to dive into like what a good award show would be? Our dream award show?
I mean, I guess. I feel like before we go into like what our dream award show would be, it's best to just preface it with like, like all award shows kind of suck.
Yeah.
Right? Like the like 1 or 2 Oscar ballots are always released every year and everybody laughs because they're stupid, right? Like they write on the thing like, "Oh, I didn't watch any of these movies, but I heard good things about this one." So and like I'm pretty sure a lot of Oscar judges, like, they have other jobs. I don't think they let them, like, take weeks to watch all these movies. And
no.
Yeah, so, like, in some ways I understand that. And then you just think about, like, okay, so, like, this is just, like, a certain amount of movies. And a movie is, like, an hour and a half to 3 hours. But for the Game Awards, like, it's just not physically possible to play every game that comes out in a year. Like, you couldn't do it. And they're certainly not paying for judges to, like, take weeks off to play a bunch of games, which means, of course, that, like, a lot of it's skewed towards big releases, right? Because those are the things that everybody has played. Which is in some ways a contrast to the Oscars and such, that, like, when a big popcorn movie makes it onto Best Picture, people are like, "Oh, that's neat." Like when Black Panther got on there, people were like, "Cool." Because they don't usually put movies like that on Best Picture.
Yeah.
But the Game Awards are very, like, well, everybody's played this, so everybody knows, like, it's good, so it's on here. And you don't get a lot of indie titles beyond the usual, like, the darlings of the year.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't know how you would fix that, basically, in, like, an actual, like, outside of a dream scenario. I don't know how you would fix that.
Totally. So, and on top of that, another kind of marked contrast to something like the Oscars is, for the Oscars, it really benefits you to release your movie as close to the cutoff date as you possibly can. Like, this is why all of the Oscar bait movies come out in December every year. And it's sort of surprising if something gets nominated that came out in May.
Yeah.
Because everybody's forgotten about it by then. With the Game Awards, it actually definitely hurts you if you release pretty close to the end of the nominations window. Like that's why that's why you don't see Cyberpunk. I mean, let's put that aside. That's why you don't see Miles Morales on this year's Game Awards thing, that kind of thing.
Wasn't it though?
As much.
Okay.
That's why you see fewer awards for these types of games that came out closer to. Just because fewer people have played or finished them, or frankly, they haven't been patched as much, potentially, like all sorts of reasons. So it actually really benefits you to make sure there's at least a few months between when your game comes out and when nominations close. Otherwise, just like you said, not enough people have played your game, or your game is still in the 97% finished state, as opposed to something that came out in April and has had time to patch out any of its bugs, and everybody has forgotten about how messy it was at release.
And see, there's also that difference, right? It's like the whole, like, the Emmys and the Oscars have been having, like, controversies about what's a movie and what's a TV show every once in a while, right? And in games case, you have tons of games that are, like, continuing games, right? Like, they keep getting updated every year.
Yeah.
And, like, they have a continuing games category right now, but, like, can you nominate that for Game of the Year? Like, they had Among Us up for a bunch of awards this year, which I think was totally deserved because it was massively influential on this year, but technically that came out in, like, 2018. So, like...
Well, it's an acknowledgement of how this system fails that sort of game, right? I mean, Among Us was a great game before everyone was playing it, but it's not going to get it's the same game, it was.
Yeah.
But nobody was playing it, and so if there's a game that nobody is playing, there's not really a category for it here.
Yeah.
There's no place for it to break through in a way that would be meaningful.
Yeah.
I will say that apart from the obvious, it's always a problem with voting that there's not enough time to play everything, that I didn't know so much about what the exact voting process was for the Game Awards before I researched for this episode. And I was impressed. I mean, I don't know exactly who the people are, so maybe if I knew exactly who the people were, I would be less impressed. But I was impressed with the theory of how they choose the awards. In that, basically, they have an advisory committee of folks, like, from Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo, basically, who then select game organizations, like news organizations, where those members of the news organizations are the ones that put together the nominations and then ultimately decide, for the most part, like 90% of the winner. And that includes now non-English media, and that includes, like esports specific publications for those categories. So while of course it's impossible for people to play all of these games, and let's not get into a discussion of the crunch that games journalists endure for reviews just throughout the year. In some ways, more so that I feel like than the Oscars, which have a pretty wide base of people who are members of the Oscars and can be Oscar voters, in a wide range of abilities to see everything or not see everything. At least here, for these folks, like, it is more or less their job to play games.
Sure.
And I don't say that in a derogatory way that you will see on Twitter sometimes. But it does seem to make it feel like, okay, the problem here is not that somebody, or even a plurality of people, haven't played some interesting smaller games. It's just that The Last of Us 2 is on everybody's list.
Yeah.
And, coming in 10th place for the Game of the Year doesn't get you anything.
Yeah. That is another thing, too, though, is that I feel like big games, like big movies, a lot of people, live in Hollywood or around Hollywood, right? Maybe you have some Brits and stuff, and then you stick all the foreign movies in their foreign category with some minor exceptions. But that does make it easier to get, like, everybody who's nominated and who's winning, like, at the ceremony, right? To sort of talk and give their speech at the end. And I wish maybe we, like, took some money that we spent getting, like, Gal Gadot and, like, flew out the developers from, I mean, not this year, but you know what I mean, from Japan or France or Poland or whatever to come and like when they win, like actually like, you know, get the award and talk about their game, you know? Because I feel like sometimes they skip over awards just because they don't have anybody to talk about them, you know?
It really makes me wonder if they should just keep it virtual.
Yeah.
Like, what's the point of renting out the big LA theater to do this if, you know, none of the I mean, not that people aren't in Silicon Valley, right? But if at least a hefty plurality, if not a majority of the developers are not based even on that coast.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hear you on that. I wonder what Gal Gadot gets paid.
I don't know. I mean, theoretically, she's there to, like, promote Wonder Woman, right? Or something.
Right.
But I don't know who would be paying who in that situation.
It's interesting.
Just
in
the
any
time
event,
and energy.
event,
how about that? The time and energy devoted to getting Gal Gadot to present an award. Maybe you get a few more people to speak about the awards that you're giving out.
I'm with you there. In any event, with the virtual ceremony this year, well, one, Jeff said it actually cost more because we had to get everybody COVID tested, and it cost way more than there were teams in like 3 different cities, which I thought was amusing. Not amusing. Sad? I don't know. Amusing.
Can be
sad.
both. Yeah. Amusing in a sad way.
But it does make me think, okay, you know, why not do it virtually? I'm always sort of interested in the behind the scenes of like what studios are and look like and who these people are anyway. So I would prefer that kind of more personal look.
Yeah.
Or just, you know, the ability, I mean, whatever. Like this is something I'll talk about, but like there are no surprises, the Game Awards, really. I mean, there are sort of, but there are not really surprises. Yeah. So just have people pre-tape something fun for their acceptance. And that would be way more fun than making these kind of awkward, not public speaking people go up and talk anyway.
Yeah.
Like, at least with the actors, it's like your job is to talk to people. Right?
Yeah.
And while I love a good, candid moment, it does feel like we would probably get more fun, interesting, viral stuff if we let people, you know, if we let Zagreus accept the award. Or whatever, virtually, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like there are fun things we could do there that would show developer personalities in a fun way.
Yeah.
Rather than just people in suits getting up and saying thank you to the whole team.
Yeah.
And then leaving. One thing I will point out about the Game Awards is that they are by far the most watched award show for the past 2 or 3 years. This year's, I mean, they had huge growth in viewers this year. It was like 83 million people watched the stream at some point, and like about 8 million of those concurrently live. Which the Oscar viewer numbers are like 23 million total. So it's interesting that this award show that is like the least prestigious of any of these major media awards also gets 4 times the viewers, more than that for some others, of even the most watched, you know, non-video game award.
I mean, I really think being on YouTube and Twitch definitely helps with viewer numbers.
Yep. No, it's savvy. I mean, I guess I'm sure that the reason the Oscars don't do that is they're making so much of their money from the television rights that they can't.
Yeah.
It's interesting the things you tie yourself to support the cost of your event, I guess. Okay, so speaking of
sorry,
what?
I was just thinking about like the Oscars streaming on YouTube and like super chats. You could like the Game Awards don't even have super chats. I was just thinking about that. Like people sending in their donations with like, oh, it was wrapped. Or, you know, somebody's so sexy. Sorry. Okay. Continue.
Fine. Yes. Today's Pog Champ is Hugh Jackman.
No.
Anyway, speaking of surprises, I want to get into my first request for Game Award changes.
Okay.
To make them more appealing to me, which is, man, I would love the possibility of nominees that are surprises or upsets or something like that in any of the major categories I said in my notes, but frankly in any category.
See, I think the issue is their categories.
Yeah.
I don't think they have enough, and I think their genre label ones are way too vague to be useful.
Look, I will say on one hand, kudos to them for doing genre-based awards. One of the big things about the Oscars, right, is that your comedy movie is never going to win anything. Like, sorry, it's just not. Once a decade, your comedy movie is somehow going to hit the right dark comedy note that somebody manages to take home a statue, right?
Yeah.
But something I do appreciate about the way the video game awards are laid out is that at least they do have these genre-based awards. I agree that they're not good enough, and I'll hand it back to you now. But it is a way in which they are a little bit further ahead in recognizing that you really can't compare apples to screwdrivers than like the Oscars can be. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I just, like, in thinking about it, like, one of my ideas would be to break it down more specifically on gameplay, and thinking about these games, like, there are awards for best narrative and best animation and best art, and I think those could be broken down further, but the genres feel like maybe they should be focused on gameplay to sort of break it down more. So maybe you have, like, best platformer, right? Where, like, the focus is on, like, how good the platforming is, or best, like, third-person shooter. Like, best fighting game already works, right? Because that's a specific type of gameplay. Mm-hmm. So it feels like rather than, like, action adventure, which they even acknowledge this year
is meaningless.
They even acknowledge this year that's basically meaningless. They're like, it's our widest category, so it's our most competitive, because it's just where they stick everything that doesn't fit in one of the other labels.
The non-sporting group.
Yeah. It's like, instead of that, which is basically meaningless, like, you actually try to discreetly break things down by gameplay. And then you worry about the other elements of the game in different categories, like animation and narrative and sound and stuff. And then Game of the Year is just for the games overall, right?
Would, in this vision of the Game Awards, would I have to choose one genre for my game? Or can I be if I'm creating some kind of, like, Mirror's Edge type shooter game, can I be a first-person shooter platformer?
Yeah, I think you could choose multiple ones if your game's major in multiple areas.
Sure. Can I name all of them Genrevania?
No.
Would there be a Best Metroidvania award?
Sure. I don't know. I haven't thought beyond, like, that basic idea of what those labels would actually be. I just think that making those focused on evaluating gameplay would make it, like, those awards maybe a little bit more interesting.
I'm with you. Here's my how do you solve this answer to that. The Game Awards are already 3.5 hours long, or whatever. How on earth are we going to divide up all of these big, broad categories into, like, 3 categories each? And
I mean, hey, it's my Dream Awards, so there are no announcements. It's just awards-based.
Fair enough.
I'm aware that wouldn't actually work, because that's how they draw viewers in, but yeah.
Now, Emma, there's no money for the show. We have to cancel it.
You said it's my dream one.
I know,
okay?
I know.
I've gotten
I'm just teasing.
a gajillion dollars from, you know, some gamer, some rich gamer out there.
Nothing like a rich gamer. Okay, another thing I'd like to propose. Maybe breaking this up into more categories would be helpful. However, if everybody can submit to multiple categories, I wonder if that creates that much more space for small games to sneak in, or if we're just going to see, The Last of Us somehow in 5 different genre categories. So, is there a way to level the playing field? Not entirely, of course, but to create space, not even necessarily for games that are that far outside the realm of AAA. However, I do feel like the Game Awards particularly rewards big games. This is perhaps an industry trend as a whole right now.
I mean, like one of the most basic things I was thinking about is breaking down animation into 3D and 2D animation.
Right.
Which means you probably get a lot of smaller games in the 2D animation category. But it's like, if you're just thinking about it and like you look at like The Last of Us Part 2 and then you compare it to like, I don't know, even like Spiritfarer. Like Spiritfarer has great animation, but if you're like looking for like a more immediately like, whoa, it's The Last of Us Part 2, right? Even though like those are different
that's
skills.
why nothing interesting. That's not totally true, but that's why many of the technical categories of the Oscars do go to like big flashy movies that are otherwise not especially good, because of that whoa factor you're describing here.
Yeah.
So this is not a uniquely video game problem.
Sure.
But I'm even thinking like, just like shorter games that are critically acclaimed, I feel like don't have the same kind of whoa factor. Or, like you said, 2D games don't have the same whoa factor or anything like that. So one idea that came to mind for me is inspired by the way the DC Theater Awards, like the DC equivalent of the Tonys, does their awards. So at the Helen Hayes Awards, they have a Helen category and they have a Hayes category that are divided by budget size.
I mean, there is an indie game category already.
I know, but it's like best indie game.
Yeah.
Like, that's the same. I feel like that's the equivalent.
I don't fully see the difference between that and what you're describing, because that's how it fundamentally
What I'm describing
works.
is at least it provides more awards that are targeted at indie games. Okay. Or more awards that are targeted even at, like, AA games. Sure. A, if that's a real thing, but you know what I mean.
That is a real thing.
I mean, okay, I know, but anyway.
It's a term people use, so you don't have to...
I wasn't sure if it was I said it, I was mostly covering my butt. I was like, I don't know if this is a real thing, so
I've heard people use it, so I think you're fine.
Fab. But, like, did Hades win Best Indie Game this year?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying, like, maybe it would be helpful to somehow, at least in some categories, provide a JV league, basically. Because otherwise you have the one indie game, and not that Supergiant isn't an indie studio, right? But, like, Supergiant is not an indie studio in the same way as some indie studios. Like, they're a little more established. They have Epic Games backing them. Right, I don't know.
At a certain point, it feels arbitrary.
Fair enough. I guess I'm saying I don't know what the budget level at Supergiant is.
But I mean, your point about, yes, like Hades winning Best Indie Game, like, wow, who would have thought it? It's up for Game of the Year, right? And that's like the problem with the other genre categories too. Like, indie is basically just a genre category. Like, wow, The Last of Us Part 2 won Best Action Adventure. I'm shocked.
I
wonder what's going to win Game of the Year now. They also said before that award this year that, like, for the past, like, 3 or 4 years, that's been the winner. It's like, I wonder why.
Shocker.
But yeah, so I feel like it's just, like, more, like, games overall thing, except broken down into, like, arbitrary categories. Hence, like, why changing them to specifically gameplay things would perhaps be more interesting. Because you can have really good gameplay in one, and that might not win Game of the Year, even if it's up for it, right? Because maybe the art sucks or something.
Okay, so that's fair. Maybe if you broke down the genres specifically enough. I'm just thinking, like an indie, smaller RPG type game is never going to break in to that category. even if it's very good. It's just because, like, for games that the genre is particularly rewards or expects scope. Anyway, maybe that's just got to be how it is. But
see, it
something that I was
wouldn't be
thinking
best
over.
RPG. It would be best, like, turn-based combat and best role-playing elements is the idea here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think I was not thinking of this as broken down far enough. So it wouldn't really be best third-person shooter. It would be like best third-person shooting.
Yeah.
Okay. I dig that. We can keep best action adventure game for like a grandfathered in.
No, that's the first one out. That meaningless award is the first one out in my dream one.
How about best non-action adventure game? How about that?
Probably less games. So
it's true. In any case, what I'm getting at here is I'm thinking at how, I mean, this happens for the Oscars, it happens with the Emmys and the Golden Globes, it happens especially with the Tonys, right? Winning those awards makes a big financial difference for the pieces of art that win, right? Shows on Broadway, RIP, hang on until the Tony Awards, because if they get enough of a Tony Award boost, like that will drive sales for months to come. Same idea, I feel like, with the Golden Globes. The Golden Globes, that way more often than the Oscars, rewards, or the Emmys, rewards smaller, weirder things. Or unlikely things, surprising things, especially because they have a category for comedy.
yeah.
Like, getting a Golden Globe can save that television show of yours that nobody's watching, right? Because it, like, tells people they should watch it. And I can just not ever imagine, especially as it stands now, me buying a game because it won a game award.
Yeah.
Like you said, what is the actual, it's like the indie game, what is this award show actually called? The indie game, the IGF Awards.
Independent Game Festival.
Thank you. So with that, I understand why that feels like something that drives sales a little bit, even if you would never hear about it really outside of like a stamp on the game.
Yeah. Right?
That does, to me, distinguish something, and I would love to see the Game Awards find some way, and I really do like this game element version of it, that somebody could win and that could actually make a difference at all for that game.
Yeah.
As opposed to The Last of Us Part 2 winning however many Game Awards it wins, or even Hades being nominated or winning a bunch of Game Awards. Like, the only reason Hades was nominated is because it was had already hit this critical mass of everybody loved it. And so, like, even in that case, while, you know, we got to see Supergiant seem a little bit more psyched about it, maybe, than everybody else on some level, it's not like that really made any not being nominated for a game award probably made that much of a difference for them.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see something where it's like winning a game award is actually something that it's like, oh, you market that, as opposed to just, you know, sicking your fans on the fan voting, and that's it. Okay. So another thing then, and there's actually an interview with Jeff talking about this semi-recently, is, so obviously in the past year, I don't remember when they announced this, but the Oscars has announced these new diversity rules about things that you have to hit. I'm pretty sure it only applies for if you want to be nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah,
so
and they're pretty loose, to be honest.
They are pretty loose. I'm not saying, like, these are not especially restrictive, and if you're not hitting these goals, like, it's just pretty easy to get around having to do a lot of work to hit these goals. Like, just offer some paid internships, seems like, and you can get around it.
Yeah, there's also, like, whatever. I'm a white woman, but, like, women apply to every single one of these. Like, if you just hire some women.
Here's the deal, though. The numbers on women in Hollywood are bad. They are real bad. Like, even for white women, they are pretty bad. So, like, it is really says more about how low the bar is that, like, to be honest, that would be a step forward. It would be a tiny step forward, but it would, like, based on, like, what the diversity is. This is not just Hollywood. Like, the Tonys should do this, too.
But it's even, like, having a certain amount of women in your cast, even. Feels like
but the numbers for that are atrocious too. Yeah, it's just like it's really just highlighting how low the bar is, that like these are absolutely successful steps forward in the diversity space, even though it's just like hire some skinny white women to be in your movies. Like doesn't seem like it should be that hard, and yet we need to bully you into doing it.
Yeah.
So in any case, if you haven't heard about these, yeah, basically the Oscars set up, and you don't have to hit all of them, you just have to hit like a certain amount of these categories where it's like you have to either have a certain amount of your characters be women or people of color, or you have to have a certain amount of your creative team be that, or you have to have internships and like work study opportunities. It's really
it's women, people of color,
stuff.
And is it also sexuality or transgender
I'm gonna
people?
look now. I
think
because I'm not.
It's
I'm not
all of
sure.
those categories. Like, well, one or the other. Like a certain percentage of all of those people, basically.
Okay, so to achieve on-screen representation, you have to hit one of the following criteria. At least one of the lead actors is from an underrepresented racial or ethnic group, or at least 30% of your actors in secondary or minor roles are from at least two. So so the minor secondary roles characters can be either women, an underrepresented ethnic group, LGBTQ, or people with, to quote them, cognitive or physical disabilities, or who are deaf or hard of hearing.
Right.
And then, or you can have the main storyline center on an underrepresented group. Now, you could probably still have all of your lead characters be white men, and they could just talk a lot about
That would be a weird movie.
Look, I'm not saying it would be great. I'm just saying there are a lot of ways to get around this.
No, yeah, like the one where was it Leonardo DiCaprio or Matt Damon was a samurai? That one would qualify.
Yes,
The white guy in the middle, but all the other ones are Asian.
Exactly. You also, for the creative leadership category, you just have to have two people in leadership positions who are women, of color, LGBTQ, or have disabilities, or are differently abled in some way. Two of them.
Yep.
That also includes, by the way, costume design and makeup design, which I guess in Hollywood are maybe a little bit less women heavy than they are on Broadway, but like in the theater, and these are the ones I pay attention to, right? Because I work in the theater and I don't work in film, although I do sort of work in film now because we all work in film. Anyway, like whenever the surveys come out of like, here's what the staff on Broadway looks like, or here's what the staff of all of the LORT theaters, which are like the big regional theaters, looks like, the only category that is ever overwhelmingly women is costume design, sometimes stage management.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I remember being like, okay, women. I feel like I remember I saw that. I was like, okay, so you hired a woman for your costume and makeup department, which is great. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad for those women doing well. But feels a little easy is all.
And yet they don't do it. So I applaud the Oscars for setting the lowest possible bar to hopefully force people to go over that lowest possible bar. There was still a bunch of griping about it. So, there's that. However, you know that if the Game Awards announced something like that the gamers would lose their freaking minds.
Yeah.
Just absolutely just
that one picture
themselves.
Of like the Twitter headline that's like gamers are upset.
Yes, that exactly. Surprisingly, Jeff seems more amenable to that kind of a rule. He seems like that kind of a rule is something that he is actually considering. as opposed to, I saw at least one article, and I'm sure I saw more tweets dealing with this year's Best Direction Award winner at the Game Awards. Which, by the way, what the heck even is Best Direction? Like, nobody who's voting on this knows what Best Direction is. That's so vague.
I mean, that's a real role.
I'm not saying director isn't a real role. I'm just saying, how is somebody judging that just from playing the game?
Yeah.
In any event, there was some hubbub about Naughty Dog winning that because of their well-publicized crunch culture.
I will say I saw direction as like overall vision of the game, and I felt like those articles were, they're talking about production issues, and it's not necessarily, like, I agree, like, maybe they shouldn't be able to win that considering their culture, but they're talking about like bad production issues, which it does come down to the creative director sometimes as well, but yeah.
So I won't quibble with like that exact argument.
Yeah.
But another like perhaps interesting category or interesting criteria for an ideal game show to implement is some kind, and this would be difficult, I don't quite know what this would be, but is some kind of minimum worker standards, right? At least for, again, just like the Oscars, at least for Game of the Year contenders. Yeah. Now, of course, that would be challenging, and there are companies from all over the world, so there's all sorts of difficulties in determining what that would be.
Yeah, but... and I mean, unfortunately, like, even within the States, we don't even have a real union yet, so...
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that'll come first, maybe, before award shows start worrying about working conditions.
And that's basically award guru Jeff's position, too. He said, we're going to let... I can't remember exactly. Like, he has some organization. He's like, we're going to let them decide how they're handling this, and then we'll follow suit. It sort of surprised me. I don't know why it surprised me, but it surprised me that he seemed more amenable to the diversity requirements than he did, like, anything about crunch or working conditions. But in hindsight, it doesn't actually surprise me that much.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly... just on a logistical standpoint, it's probably harder to prove your working conditions than it is to prove your diversity metrics.
Yeah. And what I'll also say, and what I imagine will potentially make even including diversity metrics kind of hard, is the Oscars have enough leverage and enough kind of cultural cachet to throw around that they can set these kind of rules, and even if people are grumpy about it, like, they will have to do it, right? Whereas who cares if you win a game award? Who cares? Nobody. So it's just like they don't have the same kind of weight to throw around in terms of telling people, well, if you don't do this, we won't nominate you. Because it just, unless they build up the awards to mean more than they mean, trying to exclude people from the awards with, good solidarity, social justice motives behind it it's not gonna work.
Yeah, and I mean, you do have to think about, like, I don't know, how do you handle, like, one-person teams?
Yeah.
Right, like, are they held to the same standard as other companies? Because that would be harder for them, I guess.
Well, probably not. I mean, you probably have to set, slightly different rules for different size companies, but those companies are not competing for the same awards anyway.
Yeah.
So, or even if you just set this as a requirement for Game of the Year, right? Maybe you don't. Maybe I feel like diversity should almost be everywhere, assuming you have a team that is in double digits size, perhaps. But I would understand saying, okay, we're only going to evaluate working conditions for Game of the Year contenders. And, maybe you could throw in some of, like, the big, like, you could maybe throw in direction, like, some of the really big marquee awards. Because the one-man studio game is not unless things were to change significantly, the One Man Studio game is not nominated for Game of the Year. So it wouldn't be something you'd have to evaluate anyway. In any event, to Jeff's credit, in these interviews that I've read with him, he does seem to, be thinking about these kinds of things. Which, kudos, I guess. For not just immediately saying, I'm never going to do this, but saying, we just don't know how we would do this.
Yeah, I mean, it is, like, the Spike Awards are older, but these incarnations, they're just, like, 6 years old, right?
Yeah.
Like, stuff like the Oscars and the Emmys have been around for much longer than that and have shifted over time. So, maybe it needs a little bit longer to establish itself and figure itself out.
And that's fair. Well, hopefully Jeff is listening.
Hi, Jeff.
Jeff, you here? Give
Big
us a
fan.
shout if you are. Hit us up on Twitter.
Feel free to retweet this episode. Actually, don't. It would be neat, but it would also be scary. Don't do that if you're listening, Jeff.
Feel free to steal the ideas from this episode and then put us in next year's future class. How about that?
Yeah, there you go.
You don't have to credit us. It's okay. You can just say we're revamping stuff this year based on a cool podcast I listen to.
Yeah.
You know who you are. Can there be Game Awards without him? That's the end. That's the last question.
I mean, he definitely seems like he's the most gung-ho guy about it. I mean, could they get someone else to host them? Probably. It's not an invitation to get your new celebrity friend, the Swedish chef or something, to host the Game Awards, Jeff. That's not a suggestion. But
it's an invitation to Yoko Taro and Yoko Taro only.
That would certainly be an interesting presentation. But I mean, like, in terms of, like, having something that's, like, big and showy like this, like, the stuff like the IGF and the BAFTAs and everything will happen, of course, because those are more arty, I guess. But nobody else seems particularly interested in making anything like this. So,
do you think that in 10 years they'll be saying, oh, this game is such a Game Awards bait?
People were already saying that about The Last of Us Part 2. I saw people saying that. I'm like, do you think
dumb.
they care about the Game Awards?
How could they possibly care? They don't care even a little. Come on.
Like, they don't need to be on anybody's top 10 list at the end of the year. Do you know how many people, so many people played it? So many people finished it. Like, stats for that is pretty impressive, considering, like, not very many people finish the games that they buy.
Yeah. Case in point, me.
Yeah, and this was, like, they did all these numbers way before award season. They did not need any of this. I don't know why you're, like...
Something that I would love to see, and I had been thinking about this, and you wrote it in your notes, and I'll throw it in here as something that even the current incarnation of the Game Awards I feel like could incorporate a little bit more, is I would love to see more of these people either on the on the panel or just folks in the industry in general. I would love to see the games that are nominated. I want to see people talk about why they like them so much.
Yeah.
Because, like you rightly noted, that, and I agree, I'm much more interested in reading individual writers' Game of the Year lists than I am in watching the Game Awards. One, because there are actually games that surprise me on there.
Yeah.
But two, because I get to know more about, like, there's more chance of me being convinced about a game that I don't know about or that I wasn't feeling excited about by someone talking to me about what about it made them love it than the Game Awards, which is just like, Super Smash! Okay, here's Jeff reading an award. Here's a demo! Okay, celebrity's gonna read an award.
Yeah.
I would love to see more of that.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's where you can work in the celebrities, and I want the celebrities to tell me about games they've actually played. Because you know what? That would be fun. I want to find out what these celebrities... Like, have Neil Patrick Harris tell me why he loves Candy Crush so much. Like, that would be dope. I want to know why people like the games they like. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
So, and I feel like would serve the purpose of showing people, one, that, like, games can be, like, serious, and two, there are a lot of people that like games. Like, more people are watching this than are watching any other award show, but it's still weirdly siloed. So that's my big marketing pitch, is give me more people talking about what games they played and why they played them and what they liked about them.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Thanks. And Sora for Smash, I guess.
He won't be the next one. I just did a Square Enix property, so...
Wouldn't it shock everybody even more if he was the next one?
Yes, another sword user.
Jeff for Smash, honestly.
Oh my god. Just a Mii
Can you
costume.
imagine? Is he really?
No, he should be. He should be a Mii costume.
That would be great. Can you imagine? That would be the idea. This is the idea I'm handing for free. Is a Jeff Mii costume at the Game Awards would just would break the internet. Here's another idea I'm handing her.
Are you listening, Sakurai? We're handing it to you.
There it is. Come on, you know this is, for 2021. It's gonna be great. Start planning it now. Get the coding going. Also, this is already the name of the Chicago Theater Awards, which is a shame, but it would be spelled differently. The Game Awards, mistake. The Jeffs.
Oh no. Okay.
He missed an opportunity when they left Spike to rebrand it as the Jeffs.
I think they should bring back the monkey trophy. I like it better than the angel wing one that they have.
I'd like kind of a combo. I'd like the angel wing style, but it's a monkey.
I like that. That's good.
Oh, well, listeners, do you love the Game Awards? Do you make all of your purchases based on Game Award winning games? What gameplay mechanics would you want to see have kind of their own categories? Or what other kind of gag awards? I appreciate gag awards too. Like, I'd love to see like the Broiest Bro awards. Like, throw some silly awards in there. That's fine.
Yeah.
Give me a silly award that ends in a gag trailer. I'll take that. I'll take that. If that's how we're gonna incorporate trailers, I could be down with that. Let's see. Have you ever won a game award? Are you Jeff?
Jeff?
If any of these things apply to you, hit us up on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. So follow us there for all the updates. And, maybe we'll live blog the Game Awards next year. You don't know. We're getting ready now in January in preparation for the December, not November, even though Emma didn't believe me at the beginning, Game Awards. Also, you should check out our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games that are in the hat for our main episodes, and read our blog, where you can read long-running series, Clickbait, Boyfriend, where my boyfriend is playing the Kingdom Hearts games, and Split Screen, where Emma and I are watching Coffee Prince and My Hero Academia. I finally got my kind of like dumb blog about games as lists and making lists and the pandemic and stuff up this week. So check that out too and tell me if it's kind of dumb and pretentious, because I'd sort of started to feel that way, but I had written enough of it. Anyway, it's a good pitch for it. Great. Also, and most importantly, you should subscribe to the show. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Cast, anywhere you can find podcasts, you can find Talk This. Next week, we're talking about some games that Emma will tell you right now.
We're talking about Paper Mario and Bug Snacks.
Right! Oh, I gotta buy Bug Snacks! Snacks. Yes! Oh man, I'm gonna be singing that song all... When did Bug Snacks... Bug Snacks was announced this summer. That's too bad. Did Bug Snacks win Best Music? Should have. Probably Hades.
No, I don't think it was. No, I don't think it was. I think it was too late.
That's a category I'll add. Best song.
Just song. There is a best score, but just best song.
No, but best score I feel like can be separate from best song.
Sure, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Best score
I know. Yeah.
could often reward.
There's the best original song one that all the movie musicals make their own song so that they can compete in that category.
Exactly. I would like that, and Bug Snacks in all 5 categories, all 5 slots. Nice. So that'll be a fun and light and family friendly episode next time.
Well, you'll have to look into Bug Snacks a little bit.
I've seen articles about people playing Bug Snacks with their children. I know it's about eating things, but people play Bug Snacks with kids. You can't make a game that looks like Bug Snacks and have it not be family friendly. I'm sorry.
I saw someone tweet, like, Bug Snacks is Heart of Darkness for 9-year-olds earlier this week.
I don't love that.
So.
I don't love that. Then tell me that.
Anyway, look forward to that.
Folks, thanks for listening. Come back next week for some paper Bug Snacks fun. Emma, do you want to sign off?
You do it.
Okay, listeners.
You're the winner.
I am the winner. Best returning host. This week, I hope that you feel as much ownership and expertise over some aspect of your life as Jeff feels over video game awards programs.